Okay, I'll see you in a little while.
All right.
When there is time of sufficient practice, practice in the connection to the spiritual realms, then no matter what the mind interferes with, the pathway to spirit is known. So as confused as your mind may be, or as dark as the darkest night, then the flow into spirit and out of spirit become just the same path as it's always been. So connecting through to your spirit realm is like treading a earth-based path. And as the pathway becomes certain and defined, then no matter how much weather or night is in the way of the visibility of the path, then the medium will know the way. So if you have times of illness or times of trouble or confusion in the mind, then the path must be trusted, as it's been walked when circumstances were clearer. And you walk it when it's clear, for times when you need to walk the same pathway when there is confusion. So it becomes a memory and a trust in that memory. And you begin to let your feet move automatically. And then there is certainty in the connection. Now, this treading of the path to spirit must be to the door of spirit and no further. So you walk to the point of connection, and then the path must be let go of. Otherwise, it becomes too defined and regimented and strict. And the Buddha talked about this in the Diamond Sutra and said that you must let go of the Dharma and not cling to it like a raft. The Dharma, of course, you could say is the word law or teaching. So the teaching will take you to the door, but should not go further, as this will then define what is undefinable. So the practice is important to get to that point. But by going through that door, you must open and open into potential and not be closed by routine and habit. Now, I have described this before when we have described an hourglass and say attention must be broad and then focused into narrow. And once it is narrow, it must become broad once more. It is the same with mantra-based meditation. It must be used to define. But once you go through that door into expansion, the mantra has done its job and can be left at that point. But in fact, the truth is the mantra will leave you, not the other way around. I think this will become clearer as we take our talk further in a little while. So let us move on to the healing list, if I may have the names now. Please, Brent.
Yes. Mary Larson, Marcus Alex Vitals, Amanda Kleinman, Eric Jackson, Karen Kleinman, Craig and Amanda, Katie C., Holly and Alex Norton, Richard Gatfield, Rohan Tompkins, Nigel and Michelle Clark, Steve and Denise Wareham, Roz and Janine Sheridan, Rose Frazier, Jason and Belinda, Teresa, Chris and Howard, Allison, Roberta and Jerry, Tracy, Eric, Stephen and Matthew, Marianne and Jody, Jill and Katie and Mitch, Lorna, Jane, Courtney, Justin, Jasmine, and Bill. We thank you.
The importance with a healing list is to bring the names into the heart. It is from the heart that creation comes, or through. If the names are kept in mind, then they have limited effect. The importance of feeling is a sign that you are on the right path. Now, I mentioned a phrase last week, and that was, all energy flows from the most subtle to the most dense. And I would recommend, Brandon, that you have a pen and paper. You may find some information which is useful to you in the following talk. Now, at the depth of consciousness, into the purity of awareness, which is just the state of potentiality. Potentiality starts rather still and subtle. It's a very dark world. But soon light flows into that darkness through the empower of intention. And the potentiality then starts to bubble, and the light starts to grow from this area. Potentiality then comes into the conscious space. And consciousness there can create many different forms. the forms which you see around you in the world. And from that form, then all of the physical world is made seen, observed, felt. And all of that will run through the memories of the mind. And the memories of the mind means there is a creation or an expression of karma. And the karma flows into the world and is seen. And life then is lived. Now, so that energy comes from the internal depth and flows into the physical world of matter. So all energy comes from a source that is not seen or not felt or not even perceived. So let's look at this flow just a little more. And I would like to explain it to you in, I would hope, a very clear way. So let's imagine that you have a bucket of honey and you have an empty bucket and a sieve. Now the sieve is very fine. So as you pour the honey into the sieve, it takes a little while for the honey to drip through the sieve. As each individual drop is formed all over the base of that sieve, and the drop is released and falls into the bucket. Now, the truth is the honey in the first bucket is full of sweetness and joy and connection. When you look at that bucket, you do not see a million individual drops, but one big amount. And when it sits still with no movement, it sits in its purity. And as the honey falls through the sieve, you would say to the individual drop that you are part of the whole, the sweetness. Look inwards. The sweetness of who you are is there. You are no different to the whole. You're just in individual form. And the honey drop eventually arrives at the second bucket and becomes unified once more. So the pain is in the belief of individuality. The sieve is represented here by, or represents, I should say, the mind. So the energy flows through the mind, causing, well, let's call it agitation, disturbance, form. And what looks like a birth to your side is, in fact, to our side, more of a death. You live the death and you come home to life. Now, the sieve, of course, will or may create different shaped droplets, some long, some short, some extra wide, but the honey is still the same. So karma then is seen in the world, but this is only because of the memory and attitude, if you wish, of the mind. That individual drop of honey is no different to the unified honey. For a blink of an eye, it is individual. So let's leave that just to one side and come back to the first analogy. So energy flows from the most subtle eventually into form, and form is created, which at some stage will dissolve for the realization of connectedness. Now, energy that flows from one side into the physical world and beyond, you would flows through a silver channel, if you will. And it flows not in a straight line, not like a gush of water through a defined pipe or hose, but rather flows in a spiral pattern. You see, this energy is made up of two parts. It's made up of life, prana, and it's made up of consciousness. And it flows in a spiral like a helix shape. And you see it in your world as the double helix of DNA. You also are aware of it as it flows through your chakra system, one overlapping another. So if you can imagine this flow going through, if you are able to perceive a silver pipe, energy that flows along any conduit will start to glow. And of course, if there's heat, that conduit will also grow hot. But this energy, as it flows, then causes an aura around that pipe, if you want, that cord. So the aura of man and the different layers of man also goes from the imperceivable to the relatively easy to perceive, connected to the physical body. So the flow of energy is perceived by the glowing of an aura. And then appears to connect to a physical body. So the following backwards is an internal process in man. You do not awaken by looking out there for awakening. You must look internally for where or whence this energy comes from, where this consciousness comes from. Hence, the feeling is very important. And as you look further and deeper into that perception, the silver pipe becomes harder to see. And then in your awakening becomes, or is not there at all. So all of this doesn't take place in matter, but beyond matter, beyond the body. The body is just a reflection of the karma, the holes in the sieve. And the body you have is purely in line with the karma that must be experienced. But the honey is still the honey. And one day will become unified with the whole honey. So when that droplet falls into the second bucket, is it any different? Of course it wasn't. It is not different. It's exactly the same honey. What is lost as it hits that second bucket is the individuality. So let's look at a journey as we just began, backwards from the physical body into the depth of understanding. First, there is the mind. And the mind's attachment to physical form, and the mind's belief that it's needed and required. It is the creation of individuality. Potential now is defined at this point. Man uses mind to look at body, to look at the drops, and doesn't look prior. And in looking at the drops, then doesn't see the truth. So here, the act of a mantra broadens the holes in the sieve. And points the attention beyond the mind. And it creates a wider and wider aperture. So the mantra does its work by cutting through the clutter. And when you have a bigger hole in the sieve, what happens? More energy, more love, more sweetness of honey flows through quickly. So the physical being then becomes a greater expression of the unification. Meditation without a mantra will also have this effect. And there are exercises that can also do similar work. Now, the mind is quite elastic and will try to seal up that aperture and put it back to its normality. But the feeling should be the expression of the truth and not the mind's attempt to rationalize. So as we go deeper through this mind field of mind, the subtlety of body changes from dense to less dense to less dense to less dense. And with the analogy that I have given of honey being poured from one bucket to another, you can see the truth is greater outside of the individual drops. So spirit world is before, it is during, and it is after the physical life. If the individual gets caught within mind, then the experience of the astral, the thought worlds are once again lived. As the mind becomes subtle then, further and further dimensions must be experienced. So in effect, you are just breaking down individual veils that take you back into the purity of self, which you possessed all the way along. Now that pipe, that cord, that silver conduit has a glow of blue with a white center, and sometimes the other way around. So that is the blue light that can be perceived. It's not perceived by all, and it is not an error if you do not perceive it. But your journey is along that cord. To realize, of course, that there was no cord at all. But it is the direction that you must flow. So the most subtle world is no world. It's a vastness of space of nothing, yet everything comes from it. Goes from a gentle awareness to no awareness. A gentle awareness is the very outer level of this world, and the no awareness is nearer to its truth. This is where love and bliss come from there. So you can, I hope you can see that as you awaken, your heart opens. And the opening of the heart is important for the opening of the holes in the sieve. The feelings are the important part. The rationale is no more than the sieve. And over-rationalizing will just firm up the sieve. So all energy, all aspects of self are right here now. The individual drop is an expression of the whole. It has every quality that the whole has. But it just looks as if it's limited. So the expression is, there is life, then there is death, and then there is life. And in the physical form, you are living what could be perceived as the death, not the life. And you will return to purity. And you can do that within your life by letting go of the individuality. And this is done by going internal through the heart and letting the love flow. The heart is the way. Keep walking with it. Trust the feeling and not the thought. To realize your true self. So you may like to ask yourself, where does that energy or thought come from? And follow that path. Not with the mind. That's the veil, the first veil. Until next week, let your mind be still and find peace in your heart. God bless you all. Mm.